Morning, everybody. Shalom Aleichem. Recognizing a Pasul Sefer Torah, it seems within the half-hour time frame to teach Safras and Mula Halachas, it seems like it's not really something which is really possible. I don't really think anybody had that intention when they came. But there are many, many instances where a Sefer Torah can be spotted to be Pasul. And also there are many, many misconceptions and mistakes that hopefully we'll address this morning that may alleviate some problems in shuls and some unnecessary taking out a Sefer Torah for the wrong reasons. One thing we have to realize is that Klal Yisrael, Mika Amcha Yisrael, Goy Echad Ba'aretz, we're one nation. Baruch Hashem, I've had the experience of traveling all over the world and being in many, many different shuls in many, many different states, in the United States, throughout the world, in London, Eretz Yisrael. And I can tell you one thing, they're all the same. You know, you have the same scenario, the same scripts, just different people playing the different parts. You know, you have the guy in the corner shushking and the other guy telling him, don't tell me to keep quiet, and you have this fellow in the back that has yard site every second week. You know, it's exactly the same. It's interesting, but when you walk in and you say to yourself, like, wow, I feel at home. I always say when you come to a different country, it's very strange. Language is different. Even in London where they speak English, you know, it's hard to understand the word they say. But the truth is, when you walk into shul, you just feel at home. You know, sure, you have a Sephardi shul, you have an Ashkenazi, Chassidish shtibel, Litvish shtibel, Yekish shtibel, but you know something? It's all the same. And that's why the problems that I'm about to address this morning are things that we find all over, because the Sefer Torah is exactly the same. Now, one thing we have to realize, Sefer Torah, many of the Sefer Torah today that we have, many of them over 100 years old, 150 years old. Baruch Hashem, today we've seen tremendous influx of newly written Sefer Torah. Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael again, Mika Amcha Yisrael, realizing the mitzvah Taryag, the 613th mitzvah, that each and every Jew has the obligation to write his own Sefer Torah. So Baruch Hashem, you see many, many new Sefer Torah, but there are still a lot of older Sefer Torah in use. Now, an older Sefer Torah tends to be larger than a newly written Sefer Torah. Most of the newly written Sefer Torah today are written on calf skin. Terminology shlil is actually an unborn calf, which mostly we use for tefillin and mezuzahs, but the Sefer Torah written on a newborn calf, so they're smaller than the older Sefer Torah. That's why they tend to be lightweight. But the Gabbai always likes to know what the lighter weight Sefer. You have many of the very heavy svarim, the cloths are 24 inches tall, and they're geschmack. You need, you know, we call it the Starker Club. In every shul, I don't know if you know about the Kiddush Club, they have a Starker Club, where those are the appointed boys that know they have to be in shul on time, at least for Hagbah, because they're counted upon to do Hagbah, because nobody else can pick it up. In the senior citizen shuls, you know, some of these complexes in Boca Raton and Century Village, they're always calling up, Rabbi, we need a little Torah. Why do you need a little Torah? Because a big one we can't pick up. And I tell them, but a little one you can't read, it's too small. You're right, what do we do? So a newly written Sefer Torah is written on calf skin, it's lightweight, the cloth is natural cloth. Very often you look at the cloth, it looks like those specks on the back, like a spotted cow, and that's what it is, a spotted cow. The first Sefer Torah, I remember, was written for an older couple. Unfortunately, they survived the Holocaust, and the woman was a twin. She was one of Mengele's Karbonis Nebuch, her and her sister. They never had children. And they decided to give a Sefer Torah in memory, in honor of just, they make a simcha. Like they basically said, we never made a simcha in our life, this is our simcha. You can imagine all their friends came, everybody was very sensitive to the occasion and to their feelings. And as we were sitting there, I remember, we're writing and finishing off the last letters of the Sefer Torah, and all of a sudden I hear in the background, Ganef. Looking around, where's the Ganef? They're pointing to me. I said, Ganef? He says, give up, Anaya Sefer Torah was a good They bought a new Sefer Torah. And look, an outer Sefer they brought, because what we saw was, sitting on this omni table, was a newly written Sefer Torah with the cloth, with the stains on the back, the blemishes that they called it. And they thought it was an old Sefer Torah, it was dirty, schmutzig. I saw that I was about to be lynched, so I called over one of the Rabbanim, please explain to them. It's important for them to understand this is a newly written Sefer Torah. It is not whitewashed. Many of the older Sefer Torah that you have, why are they so heavy? Fine, they're larger, 24-inch cloths instead of the 18, 19-inch cloth. But many of them are coated with a whitewash on the back. Why were those Sefer Torah whitewashed? You don't see anywhere in Chazal a whitewashing the back of the Sefer Torah. The inside, which we'll mention in a few moments about Mashuach, where the Sfaradim had a minhag to coat the inside of the cloth and to write on that, that's what we did see. But the back of the cloth, why? So basically, it was a selling tactic. We knew to sell it because many people saw the Sefer Torah with the blemishes. It looked like an altar Sefer Torah. They would whitewash it, nice, white and fresh, and they would sell the Sefer Torah. But unfortunately, this is what causes many of our problems. Number one, made the Sefer Torah much heavier because that whitewash has substance. Number two, as time goes on, that whitewash becomes a powder. It's almost a lime. And the white powder starts to come off onto the lettering. It's also acidic and starts to eat away at the letters themselves. And very often, this whitewash is the cause of many Sefer Torah to deteriorate because the whitewash the powder gets onto the letters, and the letters begin to either peel or they look very faded. Now this is rule number one. Before you call the sofer, or before you put away the Sefer Torah, and you see the letters practically disappeared, look at that, the letter's missing. And this has happened many, many times. You look at the Sefer Torah. Is it actually faded? Or is there a coating on the back and it's like a powder sitting on top of the letter? And very often, Shabbos, you have a problem with rubbing it off, but very often you can see that it's faded or even looks like a nifsak because the whitewash just attached itself to the back of the Sefer Torah onto the writing. And very often the whole tikkun is just coming up and called up. You just take your finger, again, not on Shabbos, but take your finger, just rub the letter, and magic, your letter reappears because the whitewash, the powder was just rubbed off the top. So many Sefer Torah may not be used for many, many years. Why? Nobody knows. They put it away as a gadol on the outside of the Sefer Torah. Why is it Pasul? Nobody knows. The uncle was laning and he decided it was Pasul. He put it away, didn't tell the Gabbai exactly where it was, and it's just sitting there with the gadol around it. You open up the Sefer Torah, it's a beautiful Sefer Torah. And what seems to be the problem is the whitewash. Rub it down, clean it, give it in for a cleaning where it has to be literally washed with certain chemicals that are able to wash the Sefer Torah, not harm the cloth, and not erase the ink. Obviously, certain chemicals will be used to be able to wash, not water. And then the Sefer Torah looks like it's brand new, literally. So many times there's shuls sitting with Sefer Torah that are not in use, but a beautiful, beautiful Sefer Torah. So that's the problem with the whitewash. The weight, the heaviness, causing that extra weight, and also the problem that it begins to come onto the writing. So next time, before you call the sofer, so you must make sure that it's actually not there, the letter is faded. We'll get to faded letters in a few moments. I had an experience where we restored a Sefer Torah for a shul, and the shul literally spent thousands of dollars on fixing up the Sefer Torah, took it out to the first Shabbos, and got to Geholfen, they find a Pasul, they thought was a Pasul, and they call up, fuming, and obviously after davening, a sefer, the ganef, again, right to the ganef, and they're screaming, look at this, we gave it to him, and he gives it back, and the first Shabbos we used it, and I remember the Sefer Torah was in Long Island, and immediately Monday morning, Sunday we got the call, and I couldn't imagine, we went through the Sefer Torah, and sure enough, I drove up to Long Island, spent an hour and a half in traffic, I got to the shul, they take out the Sefer Torah, it shows me the Pasul. I say to him, you're not cook. I said to him, look, what's the problem? He says, look at that, all of a sudden a yellow mark in the middle of our Sefer Torah, a yellow mark. And I looked at him and I said, what color is your mantle? He said, gold. I said, what color is it? Sure enough, he just picked up the thread that was sitting on the letter, and it covered up, that was it, Sefer Torah is kosher. Baruch Hashem, I was very thrilled because the Yisem Mikiyim. But I asked the Gabbai the next week, I said, if you make the same tumult next week and say that the Sefer wasn't a Ganav, and you were the one that made the mistake, obviously not. So unfortunately, that's where I stand in the doghouse. What could you do? But the point is, there are many problems that are not problems. So you have to be aware of understanding the lot that goes into writing and cleaning and restoring the Sefer Torah. Now, to teach you Safras, that really, there are Rabbanim in the shul, and there are halachas that are involved, and there's a psak halach where you have to paskin. You have to paskin a halacha, if it's kosher, if it's possible, if another one should be taken out, not be taken out. Now, there are many guidelines in Shulchan Aruch, Shulchan Aruch, Kuf Mem Gimel, Sefer Torah. He has a whole list of many, many different types of psulim that require one to take out a Sefer Torah. And then there are many that you don't have to take out another Sefer Torah, but the Chatchila, you should not use that Sefer Torah. We'll get to that in a few moments. There are Sefer Torah where you open them up, and as you're rolling it, you hear them go crunch, crunch. Crunch, crunch. Oh, it's an old Sefer Torah. Obviously, old people too, the bones start to creak. Obviously, it's Alta Sefer Torah, it's a Krechzach Habissel. But what it is actually is something to be aware of, because the Sefer Torah is going crunch, crunch. that means that the Sefer Torah have dried out. You see, Sefer Torah can last 100 years, 200 years. I personally have the schus to restore a Sefer Torah that's close to 300 years old, and it's still in use. There are Sefer Torah in one shul out in Memphis where I came, and they told me the Sefer Torah was only 10 years old, and the Sefer Torah was beginning to peel and pop, and the letters were popping, and they were very upset with the Sefer who wrote it. And I told them it's really not the Sefer's fault. What happened was, out in Memphis, they had a beautiful Aron Kodesh, which was built with a skylight right above the Aron Kodesh. When you opened it up, it was beautiful, the sun shining through. But yes, the sun shone through, was beautiful to see, but it also baked the Sefer Torah. As the sun came down and pounded down, the heat of the summer intensified by that glass skylight, it just baked the Sefer Torah, literally caused the parchment to dry, caused the ink to dry, and the Sefer Torah became Pasul. Newly written Sefer Torah, the ink began to pop off. Many Sefer Torah that are housed in Florida or very moist and humid communities, we have problems with that. Sometimes your Sefer Torah may have been acquired from a community, and in a community where they had that type of climate. And you have to be aware. If you see that the Sefer Torah, the parchment is dry and it's peeling, then it's something you have to be aware of, because even if we were to come and take that Sefer Torah, and the way to fix it would be not just to call on a Sefer, show them the few letters. You have many people that travel around the country. This was done many, many years ago. Today, Baruch Hashem, it's not as common. But they would spend an hour or two in the shul, and they would fix the Sefer Torah. They charge $200, $300 to spend the day. But literally it was worthless, because when a Sefer Torah begins to peel, it's a problem in the Sefer Torah. It's not just one or two letters. Peeling is usually a problem either on that whole area, the whole section. And one thing you should know, just in case anybody asks, if you come away from this seminar, this is one little fact, it's very important. How many cows do we need to write a Sefer Torah? Nobody knows? Okay, we can ask any of the kids in any of the schools we've been to. They can all tell you we need 62 cows, because each urea is from one piece of cowhide, calf skin. And Chazal tell us the halachic is a minimum of 3 amudim. So usually you have 4 amudim per urea. 245, 248 amudim in a Sefer Torah. 245 divided by 4 is approximately 62 cows, just in case anybody asks. But it's important to know that every urea is a separate urea. 62 ureas can be interchanged, can be taken out, can be fixed up, can be exchanged, can be rewritten. It is not possible to Sefer Torah. It's not muhuda. We want the same Sefer to write it from beginning to end, exactly from beginning to be consistent. But if need be, one urea has a Pasul where the letters are peeling, and sometimes you find this very often. Many individuals know when they're buying a Sefer Torah, looking at a Sefer Torah, look at Pashas Pinchas. Pinchas, that's what you look, because the Pinchas is mostly used. That's where it's open very often. That's where you find the problems. Very often we have Sefer Torah that are peeling in Pashas Pinchas, and sometimes it just entails replacing 2 or 3 ureas, and you have a Sefer Torah that's perfect in every other way. We've had one instance where we replaced a whole Chumash Bereshis. The Sefer Torah was in perfect use. It was much less expensive than writing a whole new Sefer Torah, but you actually wrote a whole Chumash Bereshis. Obviously, when we did that, we left out letters at the end. We were able to have the siyum as if they wrote a Sefer Torah. People participated in the actual writing of the Sefer Torah. So we have the letters going crunch when they start to peel. That's one way how we can see a Sefer Torah is becoming Pasul. Now, very often there's a mistake. We know there's a halacha that the dior has to be black. Black ink is the ink we write with. However, what happens if the Sefer Torah begins to turn red and brown? The letter starts to brown. With age, as it gets older, it starts to fade. The lettering becomes brown. So we know that everybody knows the Chasam Sofer that says if the browning is because of age, it's still kosher, it can still be used. Brown is one color, red is a different color. That's something where you need rabbinic authority to decide what's considered red and brown. But very often it's a faded. Sometimes we look at a Sefer Torah, the terminology in the industry is called Sefer Torah Reite Fislach. Reite Fislach means red feet, where you see sometimes the ends of the letters, the bottoms of the vavs, the bottoms of the end of nuns, the bottoms of the end of chav. So sometimes the connecting letters in the shin are fading. The rest of the letter is thick, but the thin connecting lines begin to fade. Those Reite Fislach are still kosher as long as they're not broken. But now we have a case where the Sefer Torah was peeling. And literally, you see the letters popping off, just peeling off, a whole vase. You can take the letter, you touch it, and you see underneath the gold stain in the parchment. So now that, Mishnah Torah says, is not ink. That is not Rishumay Nikah. When we have a red faded letter, we call it Rishumay Nikah, and Halacha Paskins, that is still kosher. You can still use the Sefer Torah because it is ink, it's just faded ink. However, the Mishnah Torah says, when the ink literally pops off the parchment, and now you have a gold stain, because again, this was acidic ink, this is iron gall ink, which engraved into it, even in the industry of printing from years back in the colonial times. This was the colonial ink that they used. In fact, it's an interesting fact I picked up in my travels in West Hartford, Connecticut. In Israel, West Hartford, there was a fellow who was a professor at one of the universities. He said he did research in the Declaration of Independence. And in writing Declaration of Independence, they were looking for an ink that would last for generations. And they only found the only ink that they knew that would last for hundreds of years was Torah ink. Because they saw Jews had Torahs, they were hundreds of years old, the ink was still intact, and that was the ink. So next time you're in Philadelphia, stop at Betsy Ross's house. In the gift shop, there's a little colonial ink packets. And if you look at it, it's the same iron gall ink that we use for writing Sefer Torah. It has the afotzim, and it has the gall nuts, it's the afotzim, and it has the iron sulfate, ferric sulfate, which gives it that, the gum Arabic. All you have to do is add the water. I don't advise making ink from scratch. Last time I tried it, my wife almost threw me out of the house and told me never again. So in Eretz Yisrael, Baruch Hashem, there are beautiful inks that are used for fixing Sefer Torah. But back to our peeling ink. Mishnah Berurah says that that gold stain is chaluda. It's stain. It's not ink. Therefore, I've seen many times where people are reading a Sefer Torah or Pasul, and they, it's Rishumei Nikah. It's not Rishumei Nikah. It looks like a perfect base. But you see, if you wrote a perfect base with red paint or gold paint, it's Pasul. We need Diyoy. So you see, the halach is Diyoy. So do not make that mistake. If you see a Sefer Torah that is peeling, that Sefer Torah deserves to have a gavel put on the outside, and it should be looked over. It's not hopeless. Because again, I mentioned beforehand, sometimes we can peel off those letters, rewrite them. Sometimes we have to replace the urea. Sometimes it's one or two ureas. Very often you'll find Sefer Torah, and unfortunately this is the case. The Sefer Torah basically has to have Geniza, where it's peeling from beginning to end, and then do not do anything with it. The Sefer Torah we've restored, we're in excess of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. They were well worth it, because those Sefer Torah are still in use today. They're heavier than the others. Sometimes we find even older ones that were smaller. But those are good Sefer Torah. They should be restored. But this is something you should realize. If you do see Sefer Torah, the letters are literally peeling, stay away from them because they're Pasul. That's not Rishumei Nikah. That is Chaluda Ba'alma. Another misconception is many people feel when there's a Pasul in the Sefer Torah, and very often you see the Baal Kriya stops, looks down, he looks up at the Rav comes over, he looks down, they both look at each other, they both look around. They both don't know, look at what's going on. And all of a sudden, little Yankala is running around. Yankala, come here, Yankala. Yankala steps up in the chair. Very proud of himself, he was chosen. They show him the Sefer Torah, he looks down, and Yankala reads the letter, the Rav smiles, the Baal Kriya smiles, and they continue reading. Now what did Yankala know? Rabbi didn't know. Since when do we rely on a little child to paskin halacha? So this is something which we have to realize. The paskening of halacha is the Rav is paskening of halacha. Yankala is just a mevarer. He is telling us what this letter is. Now you're wondering why we have the easel here, just to give you a little bit of an idea. You have a letter which you know is Pasul. Sorry about that. A letter that is Pasul. There's no need in calling up the tinnik. We know it's Pasul. We're not calling up the tinnik and see maybe he'll read it properly and then we can remachshir it. You call it tinnik when you have a suffix. What is the suffix? The suffix is, I have a letter which is supposed to be a vav. However, looking at the letter, the regel may be a little bit the regel of the vav may be just a drop too short. What letter do we have on the bud? Is it a yud? Is it a small resh? Is it a vav? You see, the same letter, depending on how we write the letter, we could have a resh, which is a little bit wider. We could have an endachaf, which is very long. We could have a yud, which is very short. Or a vav that's too short, looks like a yud. See, here we're looking at the letter. This we see for sure is a yud. If we need a vav, pasul. Nothing can be done about it. However, in our first example, we saw a letter. The word is elikenu. And now we see this letter at the end. We have a nun right next to it. So because it's standing next to a nun, it looks like a yud. However, if you cover up the nun and look at it by itself, it looks like a vav. So now we need what's called a tinuk. Chazal tell us what is a tinuk. V'lo chochem, v'lo tipish. He's not smart enough to be able to read the word, because if he reads the word, it says elikenu, so he knows in context it's supposed to be a vav. And on the other hand, if it's in the low tippish, that he's not that foolish, but he's able to at least read the letter, because if he just learns Aleph Bet, he's only going to mix up a Vav and a Yud anyway, it doesn't help us. So we need a child that's knowledgeable enough to be able to read the letter itself without reading the word. Now the question comes up, in today's day and age, Baruch Hashem, many people who are beginners or beginning to read, they qualify as a tinnik. Do we need the din of a 6 or 7-year-old, or is it just a matter of somebody not knowing enough to read? Very often you have beginners who start reading Hebrew, cannot read without the vowels, cannot read the words themselves. And we had an interesting case where Mesiach Lefitumai, the individual just started to learn. He came up and he said, wow, look at that, I could read the Torah. And he started reading the letters, Beis, Chaf. Beis what? Chaf? No, it's supposed to be Beis, Beis. We looked at it again, and sure enough, it was a suffix. It wasn't a Novi, happened to be a Novi that they were looking for, just as we were rolling it for Shabbos to prepare for the Haftarah. So it's interesting because this person read it now as a Chaf. Baruch Hashem, we corrected it was a Beis. But this is something that Halacha tells us, it's a din and a katan, l'chacham v'lei tipish. And you have the example with many letters, not just the Vav and the Yud. Okay. Questions? So that was the question. Is it a din in the katan of a little boy, even a little girl? I, Baruch Hashem, I have children, and as my children graduated, meaning that they became eligible to, when they started learning Aleph Bets, I was waiting for the point where they became to the point of at least chacham enough to recognize the letters. And unfortunately, Baruch Hashem, fortunately, I should say, learned how to read properly. So I had daughters and sons, but each one of them can tell you their experiences with the letters. Problem was, I knew one of my sons was a wise guy. He had he had sent him to a nursery school, a Hasidic nursery school, and they were teaching him to read with the Hasidic Havara. So this kid came home and he says, Ta, what is Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Da? Came to the letter Nun. He says, Ta, they call it a Nin, but I know it's really a Nun. And the same thing happened when he was reading a letter. He says, it's a Vav. He said, I know it looks like a Yud, it's supposed to be a Vav, disqualified. Now, you see, it's interesting because if you take a child that's 6 or 7 in Borough Park, and you take a child that's 6 or 7 in San Antonio, Texas, the level of understanding is different. And I've seen that. So it's not the question of the age of 6 or 7, or, depending where you are, you really have to know. Baruch Hashem, our children are able to go to yeshivas, they learn to read at younger ages. Sometimes the age may be even a little longer. I've had already 4 or 5-year-olds that were able to read and be able to help us with this birur. Now, once the child read it, Allah tells us that it's kosher, you should fix it so you don't have another question. Machlokes hatinoikes, right? You usually have 2 or 3 kids. I want to see it. They all come up, and thank you. One tells us a Vav, one tells us a Yud. What do you do now? So, take a third one, and then you fix it immediately, but you cannot go shopping around. We had a mezuzah campaign once in one of the shuls in Manhattan, and there was a fellow who had 23 mezuzahs, and they were all Pasul. And he came up very upset, obviously. What happened is that the Rav told him, what do you mean? We had the letters, and we showed the child, and sure enough, it was his son that read these mezuzahs, and one letter after the other, Sheilas Tinnik, Pasul. So the father looked at the kid, he started to speak. What do I send you yeshiva for? Can't you read? What's the matter with you? You know these are right letters. But the point is, it's a birur. And we have to know that he is the one who sees it without any negiyas whatsoever. The Sefer obviously is looking at the letter, he's saying it's a Yud, he wants to sell it to mezuzah. The person whose mezuzah it is looking at it saying, well, what do you mean it's a Vav? He doesn't want to buy a new mezuzah. The kid doesn't know from any chachmas. He reads what he sees. That's the birur. Okay, any other questions? Well, the break, depending how big the break is, the shear of a... Okay, I'm sorry. The question was, in Parshas Vayechi, at the end of Parshas Vayechi, I should say beginning of Parshas Vayechi, at the end of Vayigash, there is a little, it's supposed to be a Parshas Stuma where you don't see any break of the Parsha. Psucha and Stuma is the paragraph set up that you see in the Sefer Torah. Now, you have very many paragraphs that are where the word ends on that line, and the line is completely open till the end. And then you see many paragraphs where you see the format, you have a letter, the word ending, and then there's a space, and approximately 9 letters, and after that you have the next letter, next word beginning. So depending on how wide the space is, this is a shal that comes up even not in Parshas Vayechi. Let's say the Sofer wrote and he spaced the letters, he spaced the words very wide apart, and you have a shear of at least 3 yudin, that could be a problem because that can create the Parsha Psucha Stuma, depending on what it may be. So if you have a space where they left one letter or two, that's not a problem. But the problem would not just be there; it would be anywhere you find it. Now, many minhagim that we have is important. Like you have many little bikudim that go on the little dots that go on top of the letters. That's something which is very important. It should be there lechatchila, but if you find that it's not there, you do not take out another Sefer Torah for that reason. Also, one thing which cannot go by a session without mentioning the Vav Ketir of Parshas Pinchas. Okay, this is something which unfortunately every year Parshas Pinchas, my wife already we're in the Catskills in the summertime, I'm in the city, I come back to Shabbos, I tell her, Mashi, Parshas Pinchas. She said, okay, great, and the phone calls start coming in. Oh, with the sofer in, we found a Pasul. She said, was it a Vav? She says, yes, how'd you know? He said, it's kosher. Okay, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Unfortunately, we had one case where somebody called up, he says, yes, I know it's supposed to be, but I fixed it. Now what? So this is important to know. Now, if you have no Vav Ketia in the Sefer Torah, again, you do not take out another Sefer Torah for it. You can fix it. There's that machloikis and how you make the Vav Ketia. But the Vav in Brisi Shalom should be a Vav that has a slight slit in it. And how it's done, that's really the Sofer who wrote it, and the Sofer who's Magia should make sure it's done properly. Sorry, yes? Okay, that's halacha. We're creating shame. It's the problem with the shame. It's not the letters, but that's the way of being misakin. It's like a house painter. When he's painting the house, obviously, before you want him to paint, you want him to take off the old plaster. Because if he doesn't take off the old plaster, just paints over it, in just a few weeks, you're going to see everything begin to pale again. So when a Sefer Torah is peeling, the letters have to really be taken off, literally taken off. There's ways of doing that as well. And it's important to know that and then if they have to know, they take it off proper. The question with the Shema is and how it can be done, again, as you're saying it. But one thing I can tell you is that very often fixing such ureas where they are peeling and taking it off, the server can bill you legitimately. And he can actually put in the hours and give you the bill and you'll pay the bill. But from experience, I usually advise my clients not to be misat in such Sefer Torah if it's very, very bad, very prevalent throughout the Sefer because it will not last. I had one instance with an old man from the Holocaust. He's rescued the Sefer Torah and he brought it with him. He schlepped it, was peeling. And I made the mistake of giving him to Harachmanes and fixing it, and obviously it was also for the discounted price because he couldn't afford it in the memory of his mother. And all I had from that was grief to this day. Because you fixed it, you put in money, and you forgot the whole introduction. Don't use it. If you use it once in a while, it's a crisis. It's a cripple handicap. And he gave it to a yeshiva. It was the only Sefer they had, rolled it back and forth, and obviously every second week they had prophecies. Again, these are minhagim. Vavi amudim factors. Okay, the question was that there is a minhag, that the amudim of the Sefer Torah has vavei amudim. Every amud begins with the vav, except for the bakoshemoy, beis, yud, hey, shin, mem, vav. Some machloekes, which one? Bereshis, obviously, it's not begin with a vav. In this week's parasha, you have ayaz yoshit, that doesn't begin with a vav. So these are minhagim. Minhagim is not ma'akib in the laning of the Sefer Torah. It can still be kosher. And in fact, there were many that the Goyim, one held that there's no inyan in stretching letters and trying to make it coincide at the beginning of the letters begin, the amudim begin with vav. One thing to warn you again is, again, back to our travels throughout the United States, every shul has a shmelki shpritza, every shul has a velvel bisha, and every shul has a kalman kratza. What is that? Very often people get up and speaking over the Sefer Torah saliva. Very important. You see somebody about Korea, a newly written Sefer Torah, and the Sefer was every week, chutzpah, you sold the Sefer Torah to smudge. What kind of hakah? Until he realized about Korea had a problem, unfortunately, and every time he spoke, the saliva came out of his mouth. It's a problem. Velvel Bisha, they get up to the Sefer Torah, kiss the talus, and they rub it off. So first of all, if it's moisture, it smudges. If it's not moist, then again, if it's a weak Sefer Torah, it peels off the letters. And then you have Kalman Kratzer who has to use the yad when he reads, and he's scratching the yad is sharp, and he's sharpening it off. So am I telling you, everybody here knows what I'm talking about? Because Klal Yisrael, Mika Amcha Yisrael. Yes. Okay, this is a question of whether a congregation is allowed to use an Ashkenazic Torah, Sephardic Torah. Again, this is really up to the Murad Asa to decide. The same is not just Sephardic, Ashkenazi. There are three types of Sefer Torah. You have Beis Yosef, you have Ksav Arizal, and you have Sephardi, which is Velish, used by the Sephardim. Beis Yosef is basically, Mishnah Berurah brings down its Ksav Beis Yosef. The Arizal had 8 letters that were different, with their slight variations, how the letters were written, used mostly by the Hasidim. Ksav Velish is the Sephardic Ksav Minhag, used by the Sephardim. I know personally Rabbi Moshe Feinstein Zatzal that told a person who was making a simcha in Flatbush community in Beth Torah on Ocean Park with the Sephardic shul, and he was renting out the hall for his Shabbos Bar Mitzvah, and then they had a Sefer Torah, and he realized, and he says, oh, I'm an Ashkenazi shul, I'm bringing all my friends from Hillel David's minyan going to come to the shul to read this. Maybe I should bring in a Sefer Torah. So he called Rabbi Moshe Zatzal. Rabbi Moshe told him that he could use the Sephardic Sefer Torah. There's also Rabbi Shlomo Kluger that says, since Sefer Torah nichtav b'chol lashon, and we see the Colossians, he says, as long as a Sefer Torah is written in a minhag of a Messiah, we're not talking about a Messiah that was careless and made up his own ksav and wrote letters which were totally not according to halacha. As long as it is according to halacha and a Messiah, it's permissible to use. So even if it's in a Sephardic tick, the minhag they use it taking out. We had a shul where we took it out of the tick and laid it on the table, but that's something which, again, you have to ask the Rav how he wants to go. But from experience, I found that it's not something which is ba'akid, even ksav ari in the yeshiva should be. Yes. Okay, so this was a question of maintenance. The Aron Kodesh, the question was, very often you find, I mentioned before, Sefer Torah that have a problem that's prevalent where the Sefer Torah dry out and they peel. I mentioned beforehand that shul, a synagogue in Tennessee. Now, the way to keep the Aron Kodesh is not be too hot. It should be temperature controlled, and humidity is very important. So if you have it, in Sefer Torah, that the Aron Kodesh in very many shuls, in order to save space, they put the Aron Kodesh on the outside wall, and they indent it. You want to drive by the shul on the outside, you see a beautiful luchais. That's the Aron Kodesh. It's terrible because the sun bakes on it in the wintertime. Shuls that have in the wintertime, they use the basement. Winter. These are problems because the Sefer Torah freezes, and Sefer Torah literally the parchment freezes and it thaws out, and that causes the parchment to dry and the ink to dry. So you have to make sure that whether it's heat or cold, and if you do have a problem, you should see that the Aron Kodesh should always be humidified. With humidifying the inside, or put in these humidity packs that take out the moisture. If anybody has any questions, again, we give out cards. You're able to call us. You can check us, email info@seferis.com. We'll be happy to answer your questions. Or you can come by, or if anything that you need any services, we're happy to be of our service to you. Thank you.